Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Context is King. I'm Rebecca Brayton, and with me as always is WatchMojo founder and CEO Ashkan Karbasfrooshan to discuss a serious topic. So I noticed on your Facebook a couple of weeks ago you posted about a friend of yours who had taken his own life, and you kind of went on to say that it's important for people not to attribute their 100% of their worth to their career. Do you want to kind of expand on that?
Sure. I also added just as a disclaimer that I wasn't necessarily talking about this individual, but in general, as an entrepreneur in the last decade, you've seen, entrepreneurs and mental health becoming two things that are growing in popularity and themes. And for the first few years, those were always, they didn't touch. And then in 2013, there were two suicides in the entrepreneur community that kind of bubbled this up to the surface. One of them was, I believe, an alleged hacker, Aaron Schwartz, who also credited with being a co-founder of Reddit. He was part of the Y Combinator program. He was looking at some jail time, and when the prosecutors turned down his plea offer, he ended up taking his own life. And then I think a few weeks later, there was an LA-based entrepreneur named Jody Sherman, who was very active in the community. I didn't know them individually. He took his own life, and I think at that point, a lot of people started to ask questions. Why, were these isolated situations? Is there any kind of correlation between the struggles and challenges that entrepreneurs subject themselves to and them taking their life? And for me at the time, 2013 was when we had just started to kind of stabilize the patient, so to speak. This was year 6 or 7 of sustained losses, a lot of people questioning why I had done this, questioning my intelligence, questioning my abilities, really, really hard, while showing up to work, being positive and saying, yeah, if I'm not happy, there's the door, and I don't need to subject myself to this. And I remember vividly 2 words that I was so tired of, and I kind of wrote about this in many articles on TechCrunch and also in my book, 10-Year Overnight Success, a few years later. And I said it's this whole context of crushing it. Crushing it is the most bullshit, asinine, horrible.
It's like having it all. It's the same mentality.
It's this notion of crushing it was also, I say success is relative, fluid, and subjective. First of all, the definitions of crushing it. Well, what are you crushing it in? Is it sales? Is it profits? Or are these just vanity metrics that really don't drive value in your business? But more importantly, every time you saw an entrepreneur and he was crushing it, it was because he was hoping to sucker some kind of investor into writing a check or some kind of corp dev exec into buying his or her business. But you then found out that these companies were not crushing it. And here I was, this little naive, idealistic young boy going out and saying, hey, business is going well on some levels and it's really challenging on others. But I would talk about it. And I wouldn't be crushing it, putting out this stoic exterior facade and veneer, keeping it all in. I would kind of admit that this is hard and I'm in the trenches and I'm sure it'll work out, but it's not exactly going like I thought it was going to go.
Like I know there were a lot of months where we were in the red and,
every month. We were in the red every month till...
But this is maybe an insensitive question, but was suicide ever something that came into your mind?
No. For me, I don't want to lie. I've definitely struggled with a lot of things. I definitely, in hindsight, looking back, I realized I probably suffered bouts of mild depression because you see all these people around you supposedly crushing it and you're not.
But that's the Instagram effect.
But that's what I want to point to, that like my journey through the entrepreneurship lens, others see in other lenses, and I think there's a big parallel with artists, creatives, and also entertainers, and even executives. You don't need to just be, and I want to touch on that. So in my case, I think I never ever contemplated that, and I'll get to why it worked for me, and I'm not here to preach or anything like that, but just to share my experience, and I'll get to what that boils down to. But ultimately, I've alluded on the show that entrepreneurs are driven largely through insecurity. It's not like make money. It's not actually the fame, power, success. Obviously, we want to be respected and people saying, hey, this guy or girl knows what they're doing, but there's some kind of insecurities, and insecurities are bad and they're good. Bad insecurity is I want a bigger car, a more expensive car. Those tend to be materialistic. It's not really healthy because once you get a Bentley, you want 5, But But I think there are good insecurities, like I want to contribute to society, I want to leave the world a better place. But it also goes to your wants and your needs, right? So I think I've also touched on how entrepreneurs are masochists, whereas executives are sadists. We are very hard on ourselves. We are extremely critical. The good ones that manage things well learn not to then shit on others. But you have to bear in mind, the more you shit on others, it's because it's a defense mechanism to say it's not my fault. So if I were to be candid, by virtue of never blaming others, I'm effectively taking the blame myself. By virtue of saying hashtag live and learn, it's okay, there was a mistake, let's fix the process, I'm also signaling in other dynamics, hey, it's on me, it's my fault. So you do that a few times, and it becomes really hard. Now where it is exacerbated and where I could still find a little bit of balance, and that's the key, is I still just moved on because I didn't then also have outside investors or a board looking to throw me under the bus, where in turn I look to blame others. But so if you don't have this outlet, and for some people yelling is an outlet, for some people blaming others is an outlet, and those may not necessarily be healthy, I think as an entrepreneur you can't be so bashing yourself, blaming yourselves. Like the reason why I talk about my mistakes and my regrets is not just because it sounds cool and Michael Jordan says I fail every day, that's why I succeed every day, is because it is a mechanism to heal. It's a mechanism to go on. I talk about it, I write about it. People don't get it's the most therapeutic thing for me. Not everybody now is a talker, not everybody is a writer, so you gotta find something for you to balance it out. I do a lot of sports, I cook. Other people could knit for all I care. You know, people, why do you think yoga and mindfulness is really big? Because I think people understand that they need a little bit of an outlet. So the point though with that Facebook thing was not to comment on the individual. He was a friend, more an acquaintance, and we knew each other more through Facebook over the years. And you know, similarly, we both have 2 kids the same age, where I was like, I personally could not get to a point where I would make that decision. But I didn't want to judge, but I just think it's important for people not to value themselves as a function of their work, as a function of their career. And all these themes I touch about, insecurity, needs versus wants, masochism, you have to find a way, as hard as it is, to look at life as it's all gravy, to look at things as how lucky you are. This morning I was talking to entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, and they were like, you know, how does it feel, and what moment did you feel you were successful? I said, as much as I absolutely still think I'm not successful, and you know, when I was young I felt I would be even more successful, I go, there's also a little bit of false modesty when you win, like, let's say things like material things like the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year, or where YouTube sends you all these plaques for subscribers and all. I go, obviously you could point to that after the fact, but I go, the moments when I actually feel I am successful and I'm kind of happy is just when you look, if you're married, if you have kids, if you have, like, you know, we live in a country that is peaceful and safe. So it is conditioning, and the same way you go to the gym to get exercise, I do think mentally you just need to condition yourself to, you know, it's all gravy. It's a cherry on top of an icing. And frankly, as an entrepreneur, that's why I stopped going to a lot of conferences. That's why I stopped taking meetings with investors. Because there is this kind of like false reality where everybody is crushing it, and these unicorn bullshit stories of companies that are supposedly worth billions but really have never earned a profit and never will. So you have to be able not to fall in the trap and realize how hard entrepreneurship is, and like really understand like that entrepreneurship and work is a means to an end. And the end is not like, you know, get rich or die trying is an expression. You don't actually want to die as a result of trying to become successful.
When you brought up those 2 suicides in 2013, it made me think of Kate Spade, because that was a pretty high-profile entrepreneur who took her own life last year.
Okay, so great question, because I read a lot about her and obviously very successful. So again, I don't want to be insensitive to her family, friends, and just people in general. I'm not necessarily talking about Kate's challenges and journeys, but I did read others talk about it, that, you know, entrepreneurs, I always say, this is not my baby, I'm a custodian, I'm here to ensure that this is successful for all stakeholders, yada, yada. But it is absolutely true that when you sell your business, it is like losing a child. In the past, when we got offers to sell the business, I always separated myself from like the parent perspective, but I didn't make any illusions. I knew that I was basically letting go of a child. You know, that is the feeling. It is ripped out of your hands, not just literal control, symbolic and all that. And from what I read about Kate's challenges after the fact, of selling her business, successful by any material, metric you could think of, there was this letting go of something you started that now has really grown, and how do you feel about that? And absolutely, and I think it does go back to the solitude that, some time ago I asked, what's a song about entrepreneurship that you think of, you associate with? And a lot of people thought of Eminem's 8 Mile, Lose Yourself. And I was like, oh my God, it's so awesome. I love Eminem, I love rap, I love all genre music, but it's funny, I was thinking of Iron Maiden, the loneliness of the long distance runner, not because it's at all one of my favorite Maiden songs, there are others, but I was like, there is such a solitude in being an entrepreneur. Nobody understands your pain, your challenges when you're a loser, which obviously you're not a loser, but externally people don't get it and they're like, no time for you. And then when you're a success and everybody thinks, like you're on a high, nobody understands how lonely it is, right? And then I think it's exacerbated when you actually really have financial success. People just assume then that you were in it for money when you weren't, and when you have your own doubts and when you have your own regrets and when you just have your own emotions, right? I mean, it's an emotional thing, as everything is. People just kind of say, oh, what are you talking about? You have all this money. How could you possibly be down? It's almost like the super hot girl who's alone at night, or the person who seems like they're the center of the attention with 20 friends, but they're actually alone. So that is what makes entrepreneurship so hard, the solitude, the loneliness. You can't really understand what an entrepreneur goes through when they're down. You can't really understand what they're going through when they're going up. And you certainly can't understand them when they're kind of like, I've had my success and I don't feel fulfilled or content. And people are like, well, just snap out of it. And that's not really. And so I think one of the reasons why we launched Context wasn't just necessarily to dodge or embrace these more serious topics, but it's because what you see about entrepreneurship and what you read about entrepreneurship is not entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is really just, it's like a widget. It's a term that actually describes vices and virtues and mental, physical, emotional ups and downs. And the sooner we have that honest discussion about it, the healthier it is, and the more you can actually avoid things like what my friend went through and his family will have to overcome in the weeks, months, and years to come.
Yeah. Well, thank you for opening up. If you guys ever have any suicidal thoughts or any difficulty in your mental health, be sure to get help. There are lots of resources online and lots of places you can turn. We'll see you next time.